TUFS Committee on Shared Ministry earlier Monday afternoon, a member said she thought I needed a hug before we departed, and I hugged her back, infected her as well. Oh, gee. And it occurred to me that the truth was that we indeed live in a world in which we and viruses and more are very interdependent. And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes not so much. Well, I went to the doctor's office the next day to get tested for the flu and COVID, and to drop off a specimen that because I've been living with a urinary tract infection for over a week, just using over-the-counter meds. Results were that I did not have COVID or the flu, hallelujah, but that my UTI had mostly moved into a kidney infection, and that was causing the chills and fever. They treated me with a shot in my hip and ordered medication and told me to rest and stay very hydrated, which I have done. Now, I'm sharing this personal, somewhat embarrassing story with you today as something that led me to see that we value some things as you use, not because they are good, but because they are reality. Now, if you look at the words up here that I've been talking about as far as these UU values, you could perhaps view them all through a good lens, and certainly most of us would say very definitely that love is good, if it is thought of in the way that my sometimes friend, sometimes adversary, Paul describes it in Corinthians 13. But interdependence is valued not because it is good, it is valued because it is reality, it is true. And not recognizing that is where the problems occur, just like we saw with that children's video, when John didn't recognize the interdependence. In April 16, 1963, Martin Luther King wrote a letter from the Birmingham City Jail addressing white clergymen in the city who had complained that his presence as an outside agitator was unwise and untimely. This was a long letter addressing many points of concern, but here is one quote that is especially related to our topic today. Let me move it over to this word of independence on our things after this. King wrote, "Moreover, I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." Let me read those last sentences again. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Of course, all of us became more aware of interdependence during the pandemic. I attempted to read an article published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, in which researchers use all kinds of data and all kinds of statistics in looking at how coordination, or sometimes very likely uncoordinated responses to the pandemic, had affected all of us. After lots of analysis, charts, and more, here is what they found recommended. Our findings indicate that any given government's decision to lift a social distancing policy will likely affect the behavioral and health outcome of not only their citizens, their own citizens, but also the citizens of geographically and socially socially proximate communities. They found out that it wasn't just the geography, but not only just where people travel even, but even how people connected over the internet that affected other people in other places if you lived in your own, wasn't just your country or your state. These results suggest that there are significant negative welfare repercussions from uncoordinated government social distancing policies, they said, which suffer from a coordination problem resembling the price of anarchy. This implies that it's important for federal governing bodies, example, the United States federal government and the European Union, to coordinate policy actions, even in case where final policy decisions are in the hands of local governments. In the absence of coordination by federal governing bodies, we recommend that individual countries, states, and counties coordinate with the countries, states, and counties to which they are most strongly geographically and socially connected. End quote. Old English poet John Donne wrote, "No man is an island entire of itself, and therefore never send a note for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee." If we are to survive, if the earth is continue to survive in a place we can call home, then we must work in harmony together, not only for humanity, but for the streams, the rivers, and soils, and the forests, the lily of the valley, and the herbs and fungi that may one day provide medical miracles. One person who speaks so well to this need to coordinate and work in coalition with others who want to do just that is the Reverend William Barber from North Carolina. In his book, The Third Reconstruction, Reverend Barber recounts that the first Reconstruction after the Civil War saw advances in public education and voting rights, and yet would eventually cement segregation into the fabric of our nation and usher in the era of Jim Crow. Then came the second Reconstruction, the Civil Rights Movement, that integrated public schools and saw the passage of the Civil and Voting Rights Act of 1964 and 1965, and yet would see the more abstract but just as harmful disintegration of social advances through the gutting of voting laws, which are even becoming worse now than when he wrote this book, and social programs in the communities of color that are still felt today. Reverend Barber argues that America is in need of a third Reconstruction, one founded on moral principles and built through a fusion organizing model, bringing together movements that tackle a variety of social oppressions, interwoven and interdependent to move forward together. He was able then to build a coalition of what had been very distinct social justice groups, working for justice for women, people of color, LGBTQ plus folks, indigenous people, poor people, plus environmental groups, folks working for prevention of gun violence, reproductive rights, immigration reform, and many others. They would get all together and show up for Moral Mondays in North Carolina and support one another. For we are all interdependent, and we will rise or fall together. Since then, he's transformed his ministry, picking up from where Dr. King left off, to a poor people's campaign. For all of these injustices affect poor people the most. Some local communities have tried to form coalitions and work together as well. We are proud at UUFS to partner with Magnolia Missionary Baptist Church and serve as one of the Rebecca Cafe teams, which are made up of churches and community organizations, all realizing the importance of providing a good meal for folks to assist with food insecurity in this community. And we've made other efforts as well. Many of us spread ourselves thin in trying to care for the needs in this community. Sometimes we're spreading thin because our work is not as efficient as it might be if there were even more coordination across groups, more communication and coordination. I'm very fortunate to be part of a clergy group in Glenn County with folks from all faiths working together, especially on breaking down systems in our organizations and in ourselves, which have been based on the bigger systems of white supremacy and patriarchy. Now, it took the lynching of Ahmaud Arbery, a young man out for a run to a neighborhood adjacent to his own, for us to get to that point in Brunswick. We try to do that kind of thing here as well. Coming together as clergy after the Charleston shooting at Mother Emanuel Church to write a letter signed by clergy leaders of probably 30 or more communities.
Still doesn't tell who I am.
Based on one that I presented initially, which was then edited by a group consisting of me, John Waters, the minister of First Baptist, Francis Johnson, minister of a Black church and civil rights leader, and Doug Clark, who was then the priest of the Catholic Church. We figured if the four of us could agree, others would sign. Many did, many did not. Maybe some that did took some heat in their congregations. I don't know. What I do know was that some of our joint efforts after that were not very successful. It doesn't have to come from churches, though. I'm proud that our mayor has formed various groups to work with others to tackle some difficult issues. We have to adapt and be willing to ride in different vehicles with others to accomplish what must be done. We must recognize our interdependence and work together on these issues. At least communicate what we're doing so we won't be knocking on the same doors and bothering people to death about things. And that's one thing we can do to try to work together, is to coordinate how we're going to get out the vote. I hope that can happen. Greg and I voted this past week. How many of you have already voted? All right, let's y'all get out and vote early now. I'm already also doing whatever it takes to get folks who I think will vote the right way, or perhaps I should say the left way, to go vote. Democracy is our vehicle for making a difference. It may not be perfect, but the more people that vote, the better off we will be. That's why one party is trying to limit voting. Let's not let that happen. We've worked too hard in our lifetimes for many things to throw it all away. Well, before I turn this sermon into a political rally, I better find a good way to end. And I think this poem by Julie Cadwallader Staub will do. It's called Blackbirds. She says, I am 52 years old and spent truly the better part of my life out of doors. But yesterday I heard a new sound above my head, a rustling quietness in the spring air. And when I turned my face upward, I saw a flock of blackbirds rounding a curve I didn't know was there. And the sound was simply all those wings, just feathers against the air, against gravity, and such a beautiful wind. The whole flock taking a long, wide turn, as if one body and one mind. How do they do that? Oh, if we lived only in human society with its cruelty and fear, its apathy and exhaustion, what a puny existence that would be. But instead, we live and move and have our being here in this curving and soaring world, so that when every now and then mercy and tenderness triumph in our lives, and when even more rarely we manage to unite and move together toward a common good, we can think to ourselves, ah, yes, this is how it's meant to be. And Kermit would add, someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers and the dreamers and me.